Yippee-ki-yay, Martian trucker, and welcome to the Lone Star State. We're here to chew some bubblegum and kick some alien buttocks. And we're all out of bubblegum. Stick around because this is going to be a big one, because they don't do nothing small in Texas.
Welcome to Cosmic Sponge, the podcast where we talk about UFOs and other weird wonders of the world. I'm Stephen Hawk.
And I'm Jimmy Cope.
And tonight we have an episode straight out of Texas, the Stephenville UFO, in case you've ever or never heard of it. Now, usually when we do these UFO shows, when we look at the UFO incidents, quite a few of them have been old. Like, let's face it, 50, 60 years old, right? Well, this one's pretty recent. This one's from 2008. Got a lot of witnesses, got a UFO, so we're going to hit that in a few minutes. But first, Jimmy, what is going on in the news, man?
Well, not a lot. I did find something that terrified me a little bit and was amazing, I guess, as far as UFO sightings go these days.
Hold on a minute. So it was amazing and it terrified you.
It terrified me. Okay, so everybody out there, I'm sure, knows what a jellyfish is. And for those of you who don't have like a really good idea of what a visceral understanding of what a jellyfish is, imagine a spongy frisbee, right? And then get a bunch of yarn and staple it on the underside of that frisbee. And then on the other side, get some genetically altered underwater breathing wasp and staple those wasps on the other end of the yard, and then throw it in the ocean where people are swimming and sit back and watch. And that's what a jellyfish is. But you only have to worry about a jellyfish in the water, because they don't live outside of the water typically. I mean, I guess they could come up on the shore, but I mean, you stand back, you're fine. You see them there.
Well, they can wash up on the beach. You could step on them and still get stung.
Right, but that's on you. Okay, that's just on you.
I guess.
You can stay away from them, right? But think about this. What if they were in the air?
I don't know.
So Kate McHugh, she is the first woman to be a captain of a mega cruise ship. She works for Celebrity Edge, and she was on the deck of her ship here recently. It was dusk, and she was going to take out her drone and get some good shots of, the sunset. As she was doing that, somebody pointed out something in the sky. She had her camera there, and she took a video of a UFO that looks like a black jellyfish, is the way she describes it. And it went straight over the cruise ship. And then, once it got over the cruise ship, about 400 feet away, I think she said, it descended down into the water.
Now, is there video online of this?
Yes, and I put it on our Facebook page, so you can go check it out.
Is it on there now?
It's on there now. You can go check it out. It's a link to
I missed that.
She put it up on TikTok, but I found a YouTube channel that put it up on video. Yeah, so now we have to worry about flying jellyfish that's going to sting you with those little stinger things. I'm going to start wearing a hard hat everywhere I go.
Yeah, have you ever been stung by a jellyfish?
I haven't, but I hate getting stung. I've been stung by wasp, and people have told me it's similar.
Oh, wasps aren't crap.
Compared to a jellyfish?
I don't know. I haven't been stung by a jellyfish.
A
jellyfish, but have you ever been stung by a hornet?
A hornet, yes. I've been stung by hornets, wasp, bees.
I got stung on the back of the head with a hornet once, and it felt like somebody hit me in the back of the head with a hammer. I swear it did. I swear it did, man. I guess because the skin's so thin and everything right there. So, yeah, that was not fun.
But this is like a swarm of bees in the water, with the things. Now you got to worry about them flying around above you. A spaceship-sized one. Okay,
I loaded the video up here. I can't tell a whole lot about it.
Yeah, I couldn't tell a whole lot about it, but if you listen to her, she claims that, from her vantage point, I guess you could see it better in real life, but she said it looked like a black jellyfish. And I'm like, it looks white to me, but...
Yeah, it just looked like it was reflecting the sun or something. I mean, it still looks it's a pretty cool sighting. Don't quite... Maybe she's talking about the motion of it, maybe?
Yeah, maybe.
It's moving around.
I don't know. It wasn't clear. I just heard jellyfish. And I'm like, oh my gosh, now we got to worry about these things flying around our skies.
Yeah. Well, anyway, listeners, check that out. It's on our Facebook page.
Don't get stung.
That story is right under this story that I posted.
Ooh.
So, last week we had on the show, Les Odell, a West Virginia, self-proclaimed West Virginia Bigfoot investigator, paranormal investigator. It really got me to thinking about big feet, Bigfoots. Still not sure what we're at. What's going on there.
It's Bigfoots.
Bigfoots, out here in the East. I mean, typically when we think about Bigfoot, we're talking about the Pacific Northwest. We're talking about Northern California, Oregon, Washington State, Canada. Alberta seems to be a really popular spot. But apparently, and evidently, there appear to be a lot of sightings of some type of hairy, humanoid, Bigfootish type creature right here in the East. And I found one this was just from about 4 days ago. There is a Bigfoot sighting in central Ohio. I'm just going to read you the story. This is from Richland Source. 51-year-old Ashland County man freely professes an interest in the Sasquatch phenomenon. So he's into the subject. But he has more than 2 decades of work in law enforcement and also knows something that he saw on June 9th is something he can't easily explain. I have tried to explain it away, but I can't, said the man Friday from his home north of US 30. In all the years I've lived here, I have never seen anything like it. So it was about 90 minutes after a summer afternoon rain. And by the way, this man asked that his name not be used. He was aboard his riding lawnmower when he saw something near the tree line next to a recently planted soybean field, perhaps 250 yards away. A large all-black figure walking upright emerged from the tree line, walking diagonally in a northeast direction across the bean field, and then disappeared into another wooded area. Stunned, the man stopped his mower and just watched. He had no way to record what he was seeing. And he goes on to say, "It had been raining hard right before I mowed. I normally keep my phone in my pocket, but I didn't want to have it with me in case it started raining again." And you know what I say? Of course he didn't.
Of course he did.
But why is it? Why is it always like, I usually have my camera, I usually have my phone, but it's always, it's always that. You never get it.
What are you going to do?
It happened so quickly, there would have been no way for me to get back to the house and grab it. I knew it would be gone. As the creature walked, the man drove his mower about 35 yards closer to the edge of the bean field. At that point, the dark figure was just east of the trail cam, and I was hoping it would cross in front of the camera, but it stayed to the north of it. It was following a deer trail. The whole time I was thinking, no one is going to believe me. The man said the dark figure crossed the field in about 90 seconds without any trouble, disappearing into the chest-high weeds and then into the tree line. He watched it for several minutes to see if the figure would reemerge, but it never did. It goes on to talk about that he did a few things. He didn't tell his wife or anybody right away. He said that he got his son, who's about 5'11", to dress in like a black hoodie and jeans and to walk across the bean field in the same area to try and gauge how large the creature was. And he said that his estimate, it was about 8 to 9 feet tall, that it was definitely a much larger creature than just a regular human being.
And then he remembered that the soybean farmer was 7 foot 6 inches tall and called him over to put on a black hoodie and then walk across the field. "Yes, it's about that tall." And he said, "Well, I was out here earlier and I didn't see anything," said the farmer. "I saw nothing."
And then he remembered Wilt Chamberlain is growing soybeans in the central.
Wilt was like, "Well, it was going to rain, so I put on my furry suit that keeps the rain off."
Yeah, put on my fur coat.
Makes me smell like deer. I was hunting deer. I was walking the deer trail.
Right. Well, what's interesting about this sighting, like I said, this happened in June. June 9th is when he said the date was, but it was just reported on a few days ago. But it is actually the second sighting in this area. And there was another sighting in Ashland County. A 20-year-old woman walked out of the warehouse 24-hour gym around midnight, her workout complete. She turned to the right and headed to her car in a well-lit parking lot. There were no other vehicles in the lot on that side of the building. This was on April 24th. The woman heard a twig snap. She looked and saw a creature 7 or 8 feet tall and covered in gray fur racing back into the woods about 30 yards away. It was likely several hundred pounds, and it moved too quickly to be a man, she believed. Shaken and in tears, she called her parents from a nearby restaurant, asking them to come and drive her home. And in fact, there's a little map on here. It shows their relative proximity to each other. Now, there's a California resident. He used to be on Finding Bigfoot show, Matthew Moneymaker. that, signs in on this. And I was kind of curious as I was reading about that. Do you think that's where the saying, shake your money maker, comes from?
Maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. Maybe. May email him and ask. What do you think?
Yeah, you do that. I'm curious about this great furry creature that moves too fast to be a man. What could it be?
That's all she saw. Became very upset. And Mr. Moneymaker has a Bigfoot Field Researchers Organization. He founded it. And her father posted it on his website, this website. And it's posting number 6,965. Just in case you're wondering. 69065. Apparently they used her name and a bunch of people made light of it and were making fun of her, so they asked her to remove her name. But anyway, he said this is not a hoax report. He didn't think it was. Pretty interesting. Here we are in the East Coast, and you can look at a map of the county and shows, some wooded area and everything in between where these two sightings were. One was right in town, right at the gym around midnight, and then the other one outside a soybean field in Ashland County, Ohio. I was blown away by how many reports Les Odell last week said they had on the show. What did he say? He had, on his site, had something like 50 or 60 reports of Bigfoot. And it's hard to say how many people report that. I don't know. I wouldn't have thought there was that many reports. I know there's been sightings in the state and out here in the East and everything. That story, if you would like to dig into that a little further, listeners, is on our Facebook page, along with Jimmy's Jellyfish UFO story. Check out Cosmic Sponge on Facebook to get that and more. Like I said last week, if you like UFO stories and Bigfoot stories and unusual stories, you can have a new one every day. We update it daily. Sometimes 2 or 3 times a day, we get new stories.
Hey, I got a question for you.
Okay.
Why would you, if you were a Bigfoot, no disrespect to Ohio, why would you hang out in Ohio when you got West Virginia? Follow me here. So, Ohio's more populated than West Virginia, more people's there than West Virginia. Mm-hmm. So we're more secluded. You got less people to worry about. And you got like a still up in the woods to get some moonshine every 500 yards. So you can get hammered and hang out. Nobody's going to bother you.
That's funny you said that. I was thinking a little bit about West Virginia and being in the mm-hmm. East. You've flown out of like Charleston before, right? Charleston, West Virginia, flown out in an airplane or commercial airliner,
nope.
Or flown over West Virginia, like the bulk of the state.
Oh, yeah, many times. Yeah.
And if you fly over West Virginia, everywhere else in the country, even North Carolina, some of the real southern states and all that, when you fly over West Virginia, there's a lot of rugged, unpopulated areas. There are a lot of trees, a lot of mountains. You'll see roads going through them, and you'll see a house or two or a trailer or two. It's just a lot of West Virginia. We have less than 2 million people in the whole state. I guess it's possible there could be things out in the woods. I still think people would see it more often if it was as popular as we say, but
I guarantee you if a Bigfoot is real and it's been in West Virginia, there's 4 or 5 cabins somewhere up in the woods that have Bigfoot rugs on them.
Well,
guaranteed.
Yeah.
Maybe some curtains, a toilet cover.
You do have that for sure. What do you reckon that was? I don't know. There's one of them Bigfoot. I think we get in trouble if we get caught shooting it. Skin it out. Aren't there some states and communities and counties and things that have anti-Bigfoot hunting laws and things? I swear there are. I'm pretty sure in some places, you know what? I'm going to follow up on that, listeners. I'm going to have a little report on the protected species of Sasquatch on our next episode. I'm going to try and give you a rundown of all the communities that have recognized endangered species lists or things like that. So it will be illuminating.
West Virginia won't be on that list.
No, most likely not. So let's move on to tonight's main topic. Is that all you got, Jimmy?
Yep, that's it. Well, it creeped me out. It was more than I needed. I was afraid that I'd go on and find out that there's like flying spaceships that look like sharks. Then it would be all over.
Then you could do UFO shark, UFO shark.
Oh, come on, don't do that. You just became the most hated man in all of UFO community. You suck.
Yeah.
Nobody likes you. And even
hovering
less
low,
No. Stop it.
In your case, you would say hoovering low.
You so suck. Bye, Menon.
Oh, my God. I wish I would have came up with Baby Shark. I've got a 2-year-old grandson, and there are more videos on Baby Shark or a take on Baby Shark or Halloween Shark or whatever that use the same song. I mean, there's thousands of them. There's thousands of them with millions and millions of views. I would hope to think that the Baby Shark songwriter made some money. I hope so. So Stephenville, Texas. It's a city and the county seat of Erath County, Texas, United States. Estimated population of the city is around 21,000 people. It is the principal city in Stephenville Micropolitan Statistical Area, founded in 1854, and is also home to Tarleton State University. Stephenville, among several communities, call themselves the cowboy capital of the world. Didn't know if you knew that or not.
I did know that because I looked it up.
But I know the listeners don't care that it's one of the so-called cowboy capitals of the world. What they want to hear about are some UFOs. And in case you're wondering, Stephenville, you think of Texas, is almost smack dab right in the middle of the state. Have you noticed that?
No, I didn't really notice that. I wasn't paying attention. First of all, cowboy capital of the world. I've got a cowboy joke for you.
Oh.
I've been saving this up all day for you. I wanted to call and tell you earlier, but I saved it for the show.
I appreciate it, man. I really do.
Why do cowboys like weenie dogs, dachshunds?
I have no idea.
Because they like to get a long little doggy.
Oh God, that is awful. I like bad jokes, but that was not. That's so bad. That's not even funny.
That's a dad joke.
Oh my God.
Get a long little doggy.
Man, I don't know. What do you call it whenever two turtles are making love?
I don't know.
Slowpoke.
That's as dumb as mine.
Now that's funny.
It's stupid. Did you see the cow statue in the middle of Stephenville?
I did.
Did you see what it says on the sign?
I did not.
So on one side it has Erath County, #1 dairy county in Texas, and on the other side it's a rectangle. So there's 4 sides to it. So the long sides, you have the one that says Erath County, #1 dairy county in Texas, and then the other side it says 223 million in milk sales annually. And then my favorite part's the front of the side that says moolah.
That's good. You know what? I feel like on this show, we usually talk about UFOs, and I think our listeners, if they're still around, may be interested in this UFO sighting in Stephenville. So, Jimmy, I think you've done some legwork on this again.
Yeah, I don't want to disappoint both our listeners, so let's get into this. Let's see. Stephenville.
You think it's Stephenville or Stevensville?
Where did I put my little? I think it's Stevensville. So let's just get started with our first report, which happens in December, a little bit to the southwest of Stephenville. It's in a little town called Dublin. Well, you're Irish. How do you say that with an Irish accent?
I'm not Irish, man. It's Scottish. I'm not Scottish.
You're Scot-Irish.
American. No, man. Come on.
Maybe.
Okay. Maybe. Yeah, Scotch-Irish.
Well, you get around.
Half and half. Well, actually, I got a lot of Scandinavian going on, too. But
okay. So let's get back to it. So Ricky Sorrells is a machinist. He was out hunting in December of 2007. He had his rifle with a scope on it with him, and he noticed a craft through the trees above him, about 300 feet up in the air and about 100 feet tall. He said the object was about the size of a grain elevator where he once worked. That's how he was able to come up with that height. He looked through the scope of his deer rifle to get a better look at it. And he's looking up at this thing, and he's a machinist. So it's interesting that what he notices about it is he doesn't see any rivets or seams of the part of the craft he's able to see through this scope. Looked like galvanized steel, maybe gunmetal black.
Mm-hmm.
And he saw several more over his property after that December 2007 sighting. That was the first. Then we move forward in time to January 8th of 2008. Right around dusk, Steve Allen, a trucking entrepreneur, he's also a pilot. He's over at his buddy's house, Mike Odom, and they are sitting outside enjoying a fire. In January, I guess it's a little chilly, and he looks up and he sees these lights or orbs that glow at first and then begin to flash. There was no regular pattern to the flash, and they lined up horizontally, 7 of them in total, and then changed into an arc and then lined up vertically. He saw 2 rectangles of bright flame, And that's when he knew it was a life-changing experience. He watched the lights drift north towards Stephenville. He was just southeast of Stephenville when he was viewing these. They came back a few minutes later, and this time they were followed by 2 jets. He thought they were F-16s. He owns and flies a Cessna, so planes aren't as strange to him as they would be to me. The only thing I know about planes is, that's the thing you get into when you go to work.
That's what you get in to go to work? An airplane every day?
I mean, I don't gotta get a plane to fly to work every day. Not every day, but a couple times a year.
Is that on the Cosmic Sponge private jet?
Don't I wish? I fly about a couple of times a year, and I almost never fly for pleasure. It's always work.
Yeah, who flies for pleasure?
Pilots like Steve Allen.
Well, I guess you're getting ready to. You're getting ready to leave next week, right?
Well, that's true. I am flying for pleasure next week. I'm going to Colorado to see Bigfoot.
Heck yeah.
So anyway, Allen sees this thing. Jets look like they were chasing the lights. The lights seem to be toying with them. He describes it as a 100-horsepower car trying to keep up with a 1,000-horsepower car. Odom, his buddy, sees this as well and calls to his wife, Claudette. So now we have 3 different people in one location that sees this display in the sky. So that's our first witness. And other witnesses would come forward over the next couple of weeks. That's January 8th. On January the 9th, Steve Allen calls Angela Joyner. She's a reporter for the Stephenville Empire Tribune. She takes down his information and then publishes a story on January 10th. The story starts to spread throughout all the media outlets. On January the 11th, Angela Joyner, the reporter, follows up with Major Carl Lewis, the public affairs officer of the 301st Fighter Wing at the Naval Air Station Joint Reserve Base in Fort Worth. It was formerly the Carswell Air Force Base and now is used by all the services. He indicates that they had no jets in the sky on January the 8th. Nothing from their base in the skies. January 23rd, 12 days later, the military then turns around and admits that they did have 10 F-16 fighters from the 457th Fighter Squadron that were performing training operations on January 8th. According to the carefully worded press release at that time, the 10 F-16s from the 457th Fighter Squadron were performing training operations from 6 to 8 on January the 8th in the Brownwood Military Operations Area, that's MOA, which includes the airspace above Erath County. And I believe that military operations area is to the southwest of Stephenville.
Mm-hmm.
And then in mid-February, Angela Joyner leaves the paper to run a website about the sightings that's funded by Steve Allen. MUFON then comes in. They put together a 77-page report, and I would recommend anybody go check that out. Now, some of it's a little dense, and some of it's pretty accessible. The dense material really revolves around radar data. And the radar data they collected, they went and did FOIA requests at all the military bases in the area, as well as the National Weather Service and the FAA. The only 2 that gave them any radar data really to speak of was, I believe, the FAA and the National Weather Service. After they finished their report, they come to the conclusion that the radar data supports the idea that there was a large craft unidentified without a transponder in the skies that was in the same area that many witnesses from different locations said they saw something. Quite a bit of distance between those areas as well. Looking in the same area of sky and radar data that supports there was something unidentified flying in the airspace at that time, and that 2 of the F-16s were flying in that area at that time. And so what we really have at the end of the day is we have unidentified lights in the sky, a very large craft that is quiet, and it moved very fast. And the radar data confirms that it reached speeds from 500 miles an hour to 1,000 plus miles per hour.
Yeah, I was going to mention that if you go to, we've talked about this site on the podcast a lot of times. It's the Black Vault, and type in Stephenville. It'll bring up where Mr. Greenwald, John Greenwald, had filed his FOIA, Freedom of Information Act request. It says, this letter is in response to your February 27th, 2009 FOIA request seeking copies of certain documents relating to the Stephenville lights on January 8th, 2008. They include some CD-ROMs and some data recordings from the Dallas-Fort Worth Air Route Traffic Control Center, the only known air traffic records within the Central Service area. I pulled up a lot of that data. It's just, dates and times and things like that. I mean, you would really have to try and get down and disseminate this. And I know some people have, but it looks like quite a bit of data. What have you heard on that?
You know what? I think first we should talk about that data request came from MUFON, and we should talk about the two people who produced that report. First is Glenn Schultz. He received his BSEE from Washington University, Bachelor's of Science in Electrical Engineering, in 1952. And while in the U.S. Army, he was assigned to White Sands Proving Grounds. There, he participated in evaluating and improving a 5-antenna site cooperative chain radar system for tracking high-performance long-range missile launches. His contributions to the White Sands Proving Grounds radar system resulted in earning a letter of commendation from the commanding general of the USA 4th Army. I could go on, but essentially the rest of this long paragraph, which I could bore you with, essentially says this dude knows his stuff when it comes to radars.
Okay. So he would look at all that data I just talked about, and he would know what it was.
Exactly.
So
the second person is Robert Powell. So he's a director of research at MUFON. Received his Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry from Southeastern Oklahoma State University in 1976. He's worked in the superconducting field. He's also worked in device physics, statistical analysis, and relational algorithms used to improve the performance of semiconductor chips. So he has a long paragraph as well that just basically gives his background as essentially a scientist involved in laser physics, physical chemistry, master's in electronic engineering, 2 technicians. I mean, it just goes on and on. Basically, another scientist. So it's not like MUFON went out and got Joe from our coffee shop and his buddy.
Donut shop.
It was a donut shop. Well,
I'm sure you can get coffee there, but Joe from the donut shop.
Joe from the donut shop and his buddy Barry.
Yeah, don't belittle Joe. I don't remember Barry.
I just introduced Barry.
Oh, gotcha.
So they're the ones...
An associate of Joe's.
An associate of Joe's. They're the ones who go out, interview a bunch of witnesses, get details about the size of the object, the distance it is, the time, every location where the witnesses viewed it from, and they were able to come up with a pretty concise summary that essentially gives some options about what it could have been, what they think it was, and they come up with several different conclusions. So you want to go through those now?
Sure.
The first and primary conclusion is that there was definitely a real physical object that appeared and was witnessed on January 8th in the Dublin, Stephenville area. Stephenville. I don't know why. It's because it's got a PH in it. PHs are What?
It should be Stephen.
Yeah, right.
As a Stephen, it's spelled with a V. Yeah. I think it should be pronounced Stephen. But
we're going to go with Stephenville.
When I tell people my name's Stephen and they go to write it down, they always use the PH. I'm like, no, it's with a V, just like I said it. Stephen.
So, in the Dublin, Stephenville area, Stephenville area, reports of unidentified flying object occur all the time. Most of those reports are from single individuals or a group of individuals who see an unexplained object from a given location and time. They're easier to explain those away because there's usually, whether likely or not, some type of explanation that can be constructed to explain away the event in a specific time and place. What makes this unique is that there are multiple witnesses at different locations and the sightings occur over a 3-hour time period. And additionally, radar data identifies unknown aircraft in the sky at the same time as many of the witnesses' sightings. The likelihood that all of these witnesses misidentified separate known objects at different times in different but closely associated geographic locations, all within a 3.5-hour time period, is extremely low. That's their assessment. It's reasonable to believe that these witnesses truly saw an object that could not be explained by any objects with which they are familiar. These witnesses include an air traffic control personnel, include pilots and naval investigators. So I think we need to take these witnesses a little bit more seriously than we would other cases.
All right, so let's talk about Ricky Sorrells. Let's go over his particular sighting one more time. He's the one deer hunting.
Yes, he's out deer hunting.
And he's in the woods. And also, I'd like to point out, this incident is covered also in The Phenomenon. Now, I've mentioned that movie I don't know how many times on this show. No, we don't go to The Phenomenon just to say, hey, which incident should we talk about that was in the Phenomenon movie? It just so happens it also is in there. And he is interviewed in the film. And I'll tell you, man, he really come across as just being very honest about what he saw. I mean, he genuinely said, I just want to know what it was. He sees this huge object above him, very low altitude. Then it sped away at what he estimated at 3,000 miles per hour. And I just think that he wants to know, and he doesn't think the government is being straight up about it. There's a newspaper article from the Stephenville Empire Tribune by Angela Joyner, and we've spoken about her before. She also makes an appearance in the film. And I'm just going to read the article to you. Ricky Sorrells is frustrated and a little angry. Since his interview with Associated Press, Sorrells has stayed quiet regarding his daytime UFO sightings on his property near Dublin. And there is more than one reason for his silence. Sorrells believes military officials have been harassing him by flying military aircraft over his property at low altitudes at all hours of the day and night. Sorrells runs livestock on his place, and he said cattle don't react well to the disturbances. It's also hard to get any sleep. Again, his sighting was on January 14th, and this story was written on February 3rd. So this would have been within 2 weeks of his report to the Associated Press. Not just once, but 4 times he claims to have seen the massive flying object he estimates to be the length of 3 or 4 football fields. He said he's not sure about the size, because the first time he saw it was the best view. At that time, the craft hovered directly over him in the woods, about 300 feet above his head, and his view was blocked by tree branches. I don't know why it keeps coming back here, Sorrells said. He's convinced that someone representing himself as a lieutenant colonel knows what it is, and Sorrells wants an explanation. The man contacted him by telephone on January 15th, 1 day after his interview with the Associated Press. He said, I didn't worry about writing his name down or taking notes. I didn't know what was about to happen, but I think he said he was with the Air Force. The conversation started out nice enough. He asked to come and talk to me. Sorrells said he told the man that he needed time to think about it, and then the man became really arrogant. Caller told Sorrells he wasn't taking no for an answer and would be out to talk to him. Sorrells again tried to politely tell the man he did not wish to have company. After that, Sorrells said the conversation became heated, and he told the man not to cross his cattle guard. Sorrells said the man responded with, Son, we have the same caliber weapons as you do, but a lot more of them.
Texas.
Looking back, Sorrells said he believes the man was in his area, but not able to pinpoint exactly where he lived because he recently built a new home. I actually got up and looked out my window to see if I could see someone at the cattle guard. So I said, if he was who he said he was, why didn't he stop flying over my airspace with all those helicopters, Sorrells said. And he informed me that it was not my airspace, it was his. He told me if I'd quit talking about what I saw, he would stop the helicopters. Sorrells said since that conversation, the helicopters have quit flying over his property, but the F-16s haven't slowed. He also had an experience with a large transport helicopter, 2 smaller helicopters. He says he gets up about 2:30 to go to work, and these helicopters were flying over, and I couldn't sleep because it was about time to get up and go to work. I just got up and went outside to see what I could. He has a spotlight on his pickup that he uses for coyotes. I went to my truck, turned on my spotlight, shined it up at them, and it was so close I could see the pilot's reaction. He threw up his arm to block the light, and he was one of the smaller helicopters. He said that he had a friend, an acquaintance, who was formerly in the military that told him, you need to shut your mouth about what you saw. Sorrells said he tried to pull the man aside and ask him to explain his statement. He just kept saying the same thing and wouldn't explain. Now he won't even speak to me. Sorrells said because the helicopters disappeared, he now feels the gentleman was actually a member of the military and was high enough in rank that he was able to stop that type of air traffic. If it is a military craft, then the American people need to know. A lot of people have seen things around here. I know what I saw, and so do they. What do you think about that?
Well, I interpret it as, if true, the military has some kind of test aircraft that they're flying over their military operations area, and they don't want the locals to talk about it with the press because it is a test project and it's supposed to be secret. They don't want attention drawn to it.
You're saying the Air Force now has a like triangular-shaped aircraft. It's 300 football fields wide, 300 yards across.
Yes. Well, I'm saying several things there. I'm saying they have a craft which he interpreted to be that size. Maybe it's indeed that size. There's a lot of rumors that even going back all the way to the early 2000s that they were looking into large craft that were like an airship type craft that they were testing and messing around with out in the test ranges out west. So maybe he didn't see exactly what he thought he saw. But either way, if the military's contacting him, they know what it is. and they're telling him to be quiet about it. What, do you think it's an alien spacecraft and they're just saying, we don't want you talking about the alien spacecraft? Is that your theory?
I don't have a theory. I'm asking you what
Well,
your
I gave you my
is.
theory. It's some kind of test craft by the military. It's operating in their military operations area. Lockheed Martin's got a huge shop right there outside in Fort Worth, right by the base.
Could be.
Could be. I'm just saying.
But that's been well over 10 years ago. We've not ever heard anything about this top secret craft. You don't think something would have came out about it by now?
Well, not if it sucked. You don't want that bad press. And here we go. They said that they did some calculations on one of the sightings, and this is in the MUFON report, I believe. And they said the apparent size, based on calculations they did from witness testimony, gives an object that's between 524 feet and 1,048 feet. That's a pretty good sized thing.
Now, he said that the object hovered and then shot off very rapid speed. Now, an airship could hover, but not shoot off at a rapid speed after it's been hovering. I don't know that we have an aircraft that could do that. Not to mention, he said it was silent. Maybe if it was some kind of craft that had, something similar to the Harrier jet, some type of hovering aircraft that was able to do that, they're very loud. They're very loud. They're louder than your standard jet because they really got to turn like an F-35 or something like that.
Yeah. Do you think this is a return of the
TR-3B?
Yeah.
I don't know if that exists or not. There's a lot of talk about it. I haven't looked into the rationale or the story or where the origin of that is. I have no idea what it is. I mean, I know what it is. I've seen a few things about it, but I don't know where that comes from. Let's talk about the radar data. You said you had some radar data that showed some unusual activity.
Well, there's a lot of radar data from that evening, and they pull out, and this is one of the problems one of the skeptics had with the MUFON report. We have James Magaha. James Magaha. I like that name. MCGAHA. Magaha. Yeah, he says they cherry-picked the radar data and gives alternate explanations, which include secret military aircraft, evasion or illumination flares, temperature inversions, the
Of course.
tethered aerostat lighter than aircraft. You ever heard of that one?
I have. Let me pull it up.
The Departments of Defense and Homeland Security are evaluating, and this is at that time, unmanned inflatables.
What is it again? Tethered
aerostat, lighter than aircraft. And the Departments of Defense and Homeland Security are evaluating unmanned inflatables, 500 feet long. One of the things they did is they correlated all of these different sightings, getting approximate positions in the sky from the witnesses, and then combing through the radar data to see if anything in the radar data fit what the witnesses described. And they do find data to support witness testimony.
Okay, so I found what you were talking about, the tethered aerostat radar system. It's called a TARS, and it does use a lighter than air aircraft. And guess who the prime contractor is?
Lockheed
Martin.
I was hoping it was going to be Raytheon.
I was hoping it was going to be Raytheon too, but no. I mean, it is a radar system. Let's keep looking into it. Maybe we'll find Raytheon involved somehow. So their large fabric envelopes filled with helium can rise up to an altitude of 15,000 feet, while tethered by a single cable can lift up to 1,000 kilogram payload to an operating altitude, providing low-level downward-looking radar coverage. Now, they do use a bunch of these around the border. Now, I'd like to point out Stephenville is nowhere near the Mexican border. It's pretty well central Texas, but they are pretty close to Lockheed Martin. Beginning in the late 1990s, aerostat sites were equipped with Lockheed Martin 420 aerostats. The blimp carries an L-88. Primary payload is surveillance radar, and it's got ranges and some of that. But I will say this, man, that thing looks nothing like the descriptions. It looks like a big old blimp. It looks like a gigantic tail section of a normal aircraft with the rudder and the elevator, and then a big, just what you imagine a blimp looks like.
What did they use it for?
They're tethered, so that means that they're connected to the ground, and they look down. They do use these on the border to try and find, narcotic smugglers, that sort of thing. Yep.
Low-flying aircrafts. Yeah. Yeah, I saw something on that a couple years ago. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about now. But they're tethered. They don't fly around. The cable could have snapped and then took off at 1,000 miles an hour. They
are big. They are very big. They are tethered, but, once again, one could have broke loose or something like that, I suppose. Yeah, that's the thing. It just doesn't look anything like the descriptions of it. I'm sorry.
Well, here's a little bit of interesting information. Just a question for you, okay? So here we have from the radar data, we have an aircraft flying without a transponder that is clearly seen on FAA radar for over an hour, and also seen from witnesses on the ground for that same period. There are 3 sorties of 10 jets that fly by that object during that time period, some as close as 1 mile, which in the air, 1 mile is nothing.
Right, very close.
Also in the air, there was an AWACS plane crisscrossing the military operations area.
Now, once again, an AWACS is a surveillance-type aircraft, and it also has downward-looking radar as well.
And its job would be as an air traffic control for the jets while they're doing their training missions. They didn't pick up anything on their radar either. FOIA requests to the military for that data from the AWAC plane picked up no unknown aircraft without a transponder. Now, what's the likelihood of that? What's the chances the military don't see this thing, either with their eyes or with their equipment, their electronic surveillance equipment on the AWACS plane and the jets? So just a couple other people probably to bring into this, some of the more prominent witnesses, so you get a better idea of why this is considered such a good UFO case. They put it really high on the list of all UFO cases. We have...
Well, there's so many witnesses.
So many good witnesses, right? So the next witness we have is James Hughes. He's a former Air Force navigation specialist. So I didn't know what that was. I had to look it up. Air Force navigators guide the airplanes that the United States Air Force uses both in combat and non-combat missions. Navigators read maps and use radar and other methods to guide the pilot safely to his destination and then back. The Air Force navigators serve on large airplanes such as bombers, fuel tankers, and cargo planes. He's in downtown Stephenville saying goodnight to a couple of friends, and out of the corner of his eye, he sees these 2 red orbs moving overhead. They came right in front of him about 2,000 feet, about a half a mile away. They weren't going that fast, maybe 60 miles per hour, and they made no noise. Then we have Constable Lee Roy Gatton, and I was like, Constable? What, are we now in England? Isn't a constable a British thing?
I have him down as law enforcement officer.
A constable. So I looked up constables because I was like, what? But constables are peace officers who were created by the Texas Constitution. They serve as licensed peace officers and perform various law enforcement functions, including issuing traffic citations, serves warrants and civil papers. Basically, they're a cop. About 15 miles southwest of Stephenville. He just finished eating a slice of his wife's birthday cake, headed out to his patrol car to get his wallet.
That's a nice touch.
That's why he remembers this so well. And he goes outside and he looks up and he sees these yellow-red orbs, the color of lava in a volcano. Wonder how he knows that. Maybe he watches the History Channel. Of course, they don't have things on volcanoes unless it's alien involved. Then he looks and they dance around in the sky. There's about 10 of them flashing about 3,000 feet in the air. They strobe for 2 or 3 minutes, bright like German auto headlights, he says. Then they shot off at blazing speeds like a school of fish, when they're frightened. Later, 2 jets flew over. So he's distinguishing these things again from 2 jets because he's able to identify those, and mainly because there was no sound.
Yeah, there were dozens of people that saw this thing.
Yeah, now Lonnie Lee...
That saw multiple UFOs.
Right. So there's no good video of this, but there was people who took video. Lonnie Lee, who's the Dublin police chief, got in touch with Aubrey, who is one of the reporters for one of the other papers in town. 2 of the police officers, using their dashboard video, captured this on tape.
Oh,
and
I haven't seen it.
And it's on a VHS tape. I haven't seen it either. But I went looking for it, couldn't find it. He says it just looks like a dot that appears against a black sky and begins to dance. The camera zooms in on a shimmering, bouncing, but otherwise featureless circle of light. It goes on like that for about an hour. So again, we have this hour slot of time where you just keep getting more and more confirmation that there's something in the air there. Now, get this. Lockheed Martin spokesman John Kent confirms that on January the 8th, 2008, the first, and until June of 2008, the only F-35 test plane, the AA-1, was in Fort Worth, but claims it was not in the air that night. It's restricted to daytime flight only, so that chase planes can monitor it. What's that F-35 look like?
It looks something like the F-22 Raptor. Do you know what that looks like? It looks like a jet plane. I mean, it doesn't look like a 300-yard wide triangular-shaped UFO.
Yeah. Well, I didn't hear anybody say it was triangular-shaped in this report.
Here's Ricky Sorrells talking about how large it was. Still haven't seen any video on it.
Now, I have seen a couple of videos and it just looks like lights dancing around in the sky. You can't make anything out. I mean, it could be anything.
Now, there was in that area in 1995, there was a video of a UFO, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's not a great video, but it's not a bad one either. That was reported by Jason Lee.
Correct. So on January 17th, a researcher contacted the Federal Aviation Administration and asked for if any aircraft on the night of January the 8th was operating in the Brownwood Military Operations Area. That MOA begins 10 miles southwest of Stephenville, a 3,200 square mile area used for military aviation training. The FAA informed Magana on January 18th that a group of 4 F-16s from the 457th Fighter Squadron entered the area at 6:17 local time. A second group of 4 F-16s entered the same area at 6:26 p.m. They departed at 6:54 and 6:58 respectively. The time the aircraft were flying in the MOA is in accordance with the time of the sightings from the ground. And I said January 18th, I meant January 8th. So, as a side note, Angela Joyner sadly passed away in January of this year.
Did she really?
She was pretty prominent in the UFO field after the Stephenville sightings. It says here that she was a reporter for the Stephenville Empire Tribune who broke the news of multiple UFO sightings over Stephenville, Texas in January 2008. She was recognized internationally for her straightforward factual reporting on this topic, which brought accolades from around the world. 2 appearances on Larry King Live at conference and many live radio interviews. She was named UFO's Digest 2009 UFO Reporter of the Year for her outstanding work in bringing the Stephenville UFO events to national and international attention. She appeared in James Fox's I Know What I Saw and Discovery Channel's Investigation X. She worked closely with ABC producers on UFOs Seeing is Believing, which aired in September 2008 and resulted in a special thank you credit. The Mutual UFO Network Texas branch recognized her in 2008 as the organization's lead investigative reporter. She consulted with Robert Powell of MUFON, National Research Director, and Glenn Schultz, radar analyst, on the Stephenville Radar Report, which confirmed an unknown object in the sky on that now infamous night. In 2007, Angela earned 2 second-place awards from the West Texas Press Association for feature writing and special coverage. In 2008, she won first place in feature writing from the same organization, and most recently, Angela was an infant and toddler teacher at the Head Start Center in Stephenville.
I remember her on the Phenomena film by James Fox, which we talk about all the time. But I remember her asking James Fox, she's sitting at her desk, and she said, now, there was an object of that size, and it accelerated that quick. It would just cause all this destruction and damage on the ground. How can it do that? And James Fox said, I have no idea. She looked at him like, well, wait a minute, I'm looking for answers here, man. I do remember from that film. Well, it's a shame she's passed away. Let's look at a couple of the skeptical things. So let's wrap it up. How can we summarize this? The sighting itself. I mean, we have several eyewitnesses that have seen this object. Daytime sighting, right? I guess it would have been nighttime.
6 to
Yep.
Sunset on that day was, I believe, 5:44, right around there.
Just to summarize the sighting, what we're talking about is we had dozens of people, including a pilot and a police officer, or a constable, as Jimmy pointed it out, said that a UFO hovered over the farming community for about 5 minutes before streaking away into the night sky. And then shortly after that, I mean, when they said that it sped away, they're estimating something like 3,000 miles per hour. It was shortly followed by 2 fighter jets, and that's what we know. That's the sighting. And we also know that there's some radar data that could correlate some of that, right?
That's true. Or it could just be temperature inversions.
Of course it is.
So here's something else. The last time the object was seen on January 8th was by a former air traffic controller to the west of downtown Comanche, which is even further southwest of Stephenville. His description of the object was similar to the constable's. He saw multiple lights moving around in random fashion for almost a minute, and then they disappeared as if someone turned off a light switch. 10 to 15 minutes later, he saw military jets in the same area. So whatever he saw first, he's able to distinguish, again, between what he was looking at and military jets. And he compared that to the unknown objects as raisins to a grapefruit. So size-wise, the jets, he said, would be raisins. The objects he saw before the jet showed up would be the size of grapefruits. from that distance he's looking at him. So quite a bit bigger.
And one thing I find intriguing is at first the military said, no, we didn't have any jets. There was nothing going on, but then changed their story 2 weeks later.
Correct. And we mentioned that earlier, and we have precise dates and times that they supplied for those flights coming out of that base, when they left and when they landed. The sightings of the jets line up with that information. The FOIA radar data obtained by the authors only covered through 8 p.m., though, and this sighting went past 8 p.m. There's no radar to confirm this particular sighting. MUFON comes up with several different conclusions. The first one, which we talked about earlier, was the people on the ground saw what they saw, and what they saw was an unidentified craft, and it's backed up by radar. It's basically what you see is what you get. The second conclusion is that the military, because it didn't overreact or really react in any way beyond covering up as much information as they could, either intentionally or just lackadaisically, that this was something dealing with known aircraft in the U.S. airspace by the military at that time. The third conclusion was that military air traffic in the area was unusually heavy, and twice the military aircraft strayed out of their standard military training routes. So you have the MOAs, the military operations area. The jets did indeed fly outside of that area that evening when they were doing their workups. And the AWACS plane was circling the area for over 4 hours. So it's possible misidentification of a variety of those planes and the AWACS plane flying over at that time.
So I have a little bit of an issue with that. I mean, now I realize that's a MUFON report and they're trying to do their best to cover their bases, and that's good, especially coming from MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network. But too many witnesses who had a very clear view that were on a hill, clearing brush, doing whatever, and had views for miles around. Texas, in that part of the country, is very flat, and they could see the sky and the ground very clearly for a long distance. And we have this report of something that was moving very fast, then stopped and hovers for a significant amount of time. The colors are changing, they're pulsing, they're doing all these things, and then the object seems to brighten up and then shoot straight up in the sky. I have one report that says that. And then you get it from different vantage points around the town, and all these people seeing the same thing. It just doesn't add up. I mean, people, they live pretty close to this base, right? Didn't you make a point that they live close to the air base?
There's several military air bases, the largest which I believe is in Fort Worth, which is...
Well, that's a pretty good ways away. But anyway, I mean, and then you have a pilot involved who most definitely would know what an aircraft looks like in the sky. And all these different vantage points, all of them describing a very large object. I mean, dozens and dozens of witnesses, all describing a very, very similar sighting. Then it disappears, and short time after that, 2 F-16s appear, flying very fast. I think the pilot said that they flew across the sky in the same portion of the sky that would, in 2 minutes, that would take him 20 minutes in his Cessna.
Yeah.
So they were getting on it. They were moving. We have that. So you have a direct comparison, just like you had pointed out earlier. We have a direct comparison of here's this object that's large, it's in this portion of the sky. Shortly after that, 2 aircraft do come in, and they say, yeah, we recognize 2 F-16s. The military originally denies it, and then 2 weeks later says, oh, there was a communication error. Yeah, we had some aircraft out there. So was it a communication error? Was that the Air Force just coming forth and saying, okay, yeah, we made a mistake. We did have some planes out. Maybe. Probably. But maybe not. Maybe at first they just wanted to keep it all tamped down. And then you have the story of Mr. Sorrells, who's got helicopters and jets flying over his house for a couple of weeks, and someone calling him on the phone and telling him to keep it quiet. Now, granted, that could have been a prank caller. I thought of that. May have not been anyone from the military at all. I just find the misidentification of an aircraft unlikely, is all I'm saying about that. But anyway, go on with some more of the MUFON solutions.
Well, that was pretty much it. They have this last conclusion, is that there are indications the requests submitted under the Freedom of Information Act are not considered seriously by the U.S. military and were completely ignored by the Department of Homeland Security's branch and the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. I don't know if that's the Department of Homeland Security's branch, U.S. Customs and Border Patrol. Is that one thing?
It sounds like that. No, I don't think so.
Or is that two things? Where's my tax dollars going?
Yeah, Border Patrol might be part of Homeland Security now. I don't know.
I don't know. But if true, this would be a violation of a law passed by Congress of the United States. FOIA requests are usually handled by a clerk, who is an intermediary between the submitter and whoever within the military decides what information can be provided. The reply is uniformly the same from military base to military base. The standard reply has obviously been crafted specifically in the manner that the military should use to deal with FOIAs from the public. The standard reply is, there are no responsive records that meet your request. They were pretty specific in their request, and I guess they tried more than once, but it's unclear. They were clearly frustrated by the lack of information they were getting from the military operations and did not like that particular response. There are no responsive records that meet your request. So they surmised that perhaps it would be a threat to national security to release any information. And given that it is, what is that, 7 years after 9/11? Maybe the response should have been, we cannot release this information due to reasons of national security. So they were really happy with what they got from the Federal Aviation Administration and from the National Weather Service, and that's where most of the information they have. I think mainly the FAA. They did say the National Weather Service, while they were as responsive as they could be, the kind of data that they collect is more related to weather than the FAA, which has a lot of data on air traffic.
Right. And I see that too. I have this from a different source on the Black Vault, where it says inquiries made about the UFO incident have been stonewalled by the United States Air Force.
What's the likelihood that they have this large craft and have kept it? What's the chances they have the TR-3B and they've kept it under wraps for how long now? 30, 40 years?
I have no idea. I mean, I don't know that exists. Again, I don't know much about it other than just seeing it in passing here and there. When we were talking about the Belgium UFOs, it came up that's what it was. And then I looked at it a little bit, saying that you spin Mercury around, or it's a craft derived from crashed UFO technology and things like that. And it just looked a little conspiracy theory to me.
It's made from unicorn horns and the tears from leprechauns.
I mean, I will look into that one of these days. Maybe we'll do a show on that. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't think it would be the speed it was moving, according to all the witnesses, really rule out just about anything that we have. First, as I had said earlier, if something did accelerate at 3,000 miles per hour and it was that size, or accelerate it very fast, to say half that, it would cause significant shockwave that low to the ground. You would at least hear a sonic boom. But once again, here we have a UFO that zooms away at a very high rate of speed that does not emit a sonic boom, which we've heard over and over from other UFO reports.
Well, did they drug test everybody? I mean, were there mushrooms in the area during that period of time?
Yeah.
I ask you.
Yeah. So a couple things listeners may be interested in knowing. On January 8th, which was the sighting, this case was covered by Larry King from Larry King Live on CNN. So if you want to get into it a little bit more, see some of the interviews, you can find that on YouTube. It was also on the History Channel show UFO Hunters. So here we go. I've got a skeptic claim here. This is actually from an NPR site, All Things Considered, and it was a little interview they did with, the interviewer was Robert Siegel. People that listen to NPR probably have heard of him. Christine Holloman is a spokeswoman for the Harvard Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. She believes it was what is known as a superior mirage.
As opposed to an inferior mirage?
Correct. A superior mirage. If it would have been an inferior mirage, everyone would have known. They could have told right away.
They'd be like, hey, look at that. That's a mirage.
So during the interview, he says, well, what is a superior? He says, what have you seen of a superior mirage phenomenon? She says, anyone who has seen a sunrise or a sunset, the same phenomena occurs to the sun every day and makes it appear to be above the horizon when it's actually slightly below it. Okay, we know that. Very large red light up to 3,000 feet up, and the lights like strobe lights. How would that illusion be created if that's what it is? It's hard to say for sure, since I haven't seen it. Of course you haven't, but you'll still speculate about it. But there are a lot of natural phenomena that can make things look unusual in the sky. We get a lot of phone calls from people who see a bright light on the horizon that seems to be shimmering, dancing around, changing colors, and they think it might be an artificial object. But then we look up at our planetarium software and find out that no, it's actually the planet Venus on the horizon, of course.
Why can't it be the planet Venus? Why can't it? Does it have to be a spaceship, Stephen? You tell me, Mr. Hawk. Does it have to be?
Something like this. It would have to be unusual weather conditions, something with cooler air close to the surface, much warmer air up high. Then she goes on to say, I would say extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof. Blah, 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 blah. That's nothing. Why did they even talk about it? She had zero.
She had blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I might leave it in just because there's nothing being said. That's ridiculous. That's the worst speculation I've ever heard in my life. Well, it must have been something, Come on the show, you expert, and tell us what you think it was. Well, it had to be something like weather.
You want me to hit you with some really good skeptical stuff?
I want to hear something really skeptically
This
good.
is skeptically good. I don't know if this is what it was, but it is interesting information that we put in our pocket for future cases. So remember my brother-in-arms, Mr. Magaha. Magaha.
Yeah.
I love his name, Magaha.
I remember.
I hope that's how you say it, Magaha. Anyway, Mr. Magaha believes that Stephenville and Phoenix, remember the Phoenix Lights and many other sightings, can be or may be attributed to military aircraft and invasion or illumination flares. Stick with me here because I learned something about flares I didn't know, which I thought was really interesting. Flares have long been associated with UFO sightings, particularly from the skeptic side. Stick with me here.
I know. If listeners could see me, they would see my face rolling my eyes because it's the same old excuse everybody comes up with. But go for it.
They can hear your eyes rolling.
They can hear the disbelief
the
in my eyes.
I can hear your eyes rolling. He starts out by saying that in 1942, the sky over Southern California lit up with strange blinking lights near various defense plants in what has become known as the Battle of Los Angeles. The Navy unloaded 4 batteries of anti-aircraft artillery at what turned out to be a balloon carrying a red flare. A decade ago, mysterious lights seen by thousands of Phoenix residents were actually leftover flares dumped by A-10 pilots with the Maryland Air National Guard, at least presumably.
I've heard that before.
Now, some of the Erath County residents dismissed the flare theory. Steve Allen, for example, says, I've seen military flares. They're not even the same color as the ones I saw. But evasion flare technology evolves rapidly as the military tries to keep one step ahead of the increasingly sophisticated tracking capabilities of anti-aircraft missiles. At one time, evasive maneuvers consisted of sharp turns against the sun. While missiles got smarter, pilots began dropping bright flares. Infrared seekers would home in on the decoys while the warplanes fled from the field of view. But today's missiles can track far more than the heat signatures of engines. They can pick out targets among decoys by discerning a warplane's movement and shape. Spectral sensors on missiles can even detect the color difference between a jet engine and a flare. In response, the military has deployed a variety of flares that can move under their own power and change color. I didn't know that. Did you know that?
I knew what military flares were used for. It's also called chaff. Yeah, it originated from whenever an enemy aircraft or a SAM, a surface air missile, is fired at an aircraft. You put this flare out there that's actually hotter than your engine, so that the heat seeker will go after it or the infrared tracker will go after it. And I can certainly see that we've developed perhaps even top secret right now, more sophisticated flares. But when you watch flares being deployed from an aircraft, they have to obey gravity. I don't know about the maneuver thing. I don't know how they do that. Maybe there is something like that. Maybe that's what the whole top secret's all about. But I will say I find it highly unlikely they would, in either case, that they would deploy these flares over populated areas. They're typically done on training grounds because those flares are large canisters. And they fall. They have to come down somewhere. Nice theory, but I find it unlikely that the military would have dropped flares. And no aircraft were seen prior to the sighting. They were seen well after the sighting. That's my answer to that. I mean, that's a good theory, and I get it. And maybe there is some new fancy flare that can maneuver. It's more like a rocket or something that takes off or shoots backwards or something like that. But I think the people probably...
Or hovers?
Well, I don't know. If you would have saw it on the ground, lights and things like that at night, it's hard to say. Maybe. But again, I find it highly unlikely something like that would be deployed over a populated area. Those are usually done when they go out to the desert to train, or they're training, the Navy trains out at sea and the area is being cleared of all the fishing boats and anything else that could potentially be in the area, because they are big and they're dangerous and they could kill people. They could destroy a lot of property if they hit the ground.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting they have flares that can move of their own volition. That's pretty cool.
Now, I may look at that. I've never heard that, but I know exactly what they're talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, I know what they're for, but I would urge you to look at a military aircraft deploying flares and then ask yourself if you think that's what it is. The same with the Phoenix Lights. I mean, and I don't want to get too much into the Phoenix Lights, and I've thought a lot about that case. My sister asked me, when are you guys going to do the Phoenix Lights? And I'm like, I don't know. I've looked at that one a lot, and I don't know on that.
It's a hard one because there's a lot of information that isn't in the mainstream that if you dig a little bit, you find out there were people who had a really good view of this sitting on top of the hill there going into Phoenix.
Yep. Yeah, and there's a lot of witnesses of the craft, but then I always have a problem of the lights disappearing one by one,
I do too.
As if they're going out. I don't know. We'll talk about that one on another episode sometime, so.
For sure. So where I come out on this is really pretty simple. I love the cow. I want the cow. The cow is awesome. Angela Joyner, rock star. We're going to miss her.
Yeah, for sure.
And number 3, I think the military knew what this craft was. Now, whether you want to go on the side of it was an alien craft with Venetians inside there or something.
Aliens,
it was aliens.
y'all.
Aliens. Inside of that craft, or whether I believe it was some kind of secret military craft, because they had to know about it. I just don't see how they couldn't know about it, particularly given the response from the military all the way through this.
Yeah, I always take issue with it was a secret military craft, even though I recognize that could be possible.
Do you agree that the military knew it was there?
I think the military knew something about it, not to mention despite the FOIA report, they refused to give up their radar data.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think the military knew something about what was happening and chose not to share it with the public for sure.
Right. So then it comes one of two things, right? It's something they own, either Lockheed Martin's testing something for them, or it's something they own that they're testing that Lockheed's helping them with, or some other company. It's either that, or it's something they don't own because it belongs to the tall white aliens.
Or it could be from a foreign entity.
Well, the short gray aliens.
No, I mean the Russian short gray aliens.
The knobby-headed ones?
The knobby-headed ones. No, I don't know. I'm not going to come out like saying that. But I think something unusual happened here. I think people saw something for real, something that can't be explained away as Venus or light over the horizon in some superior mirage joke. I mean, I just really get annoyed at how simplistic some of these people, these astronomers and scientific people, just throw out the most mundane explanation for something that these people who are outdoors hunting and doing things and in the area see the night sky often, and then they see something really unusual, and then they just want to make it a really super easy explanation. And maybe it could be, but we'll never know.
I prefer to go to super complicated, like they all had Lucky Charms that morning, but instead of the regular mushrooms, there was special mushrooms.
The blue speckled ones. I agree with you. I think the military did know something about this for sure.
Well, then you got two choices, right? It's terrestrial or it's not. What else you have? I mean, if that is the case.
Well, I mean, I guess it's possible that the military had some type of experimental technology up there, but I don't think that it fits with the description that the witnesses saw in the fact that the F-16s arrived later, as if they're chasing it. That seems, and then that really could have been just a coincidence. It's possible. But I find it really odd that they won't give up. They really won't talk about it. Of course, they never do. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. May just be another fast walker, as NORAD calls them. You ever heard about that?
No. What's a fast walker?
That's what NORAD calls them. They're responsible for all the airspace over North America. Occasionally, they'll have a UFO that moves very quickly, and they just call it a fast walker. And that's a known fact. That's in the documentation. I have a whole big paper I downloaded a while back talking about fast walkers. They just ignore them because they've seen them before and they know they're there. But
do they have slow walkers?
I don't think so. It's just a nickname they've given them, fast walkers. That may have been a fast walker that NORAD saw and said, "Hey, wait a minute, that's stopped."
So while Steve is away, I'm going to talk a little bit about why flares are the best option for this particular UFO. Well, flares and mushrooms. Flares, mushrooms, and the Mothman. So I think what likely happened is the Mothman had stolen some military flares, popped a couple of mushrooms, and flown down from West Virginia to do a little sightseeing. He lit the flares, and he's looking around at all the stuff, and that's when the Mothman parachuted down.
Talking about Mothman again?
Nope. I did not just sit here and
love
speculate on the Stephenville sighting actually being Mothman with aviation flares.
Oh, that's good.
In his hands.
That's good.
In his clawed
All right,
hands.
you know what? I love it. Let's do this. Let's wrap this one up. So, Jimmy, you got anything else to add to the Stephenville UFO sighting? I think we've covered all the bases.
No, nothing left to add. I'm definitely not going to talk about mushrooms, flares, and Mothman.
Okay. Sounds good, man. Well, so I think we're going to wrap this one up for this week. I would like to, but before we go, if you have a story to tell and you'd like to share it with us, and we have your permission to, we'll share it with the other listeners on the air. Just email us at firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. And with all that being said, anything else, Jimmy? Am I leaving anything out? What other stuff we got? We got the webpage. We got the cosmicsponge.com. We got the Facebook. We got the Instagram.
We got the Kung Fu Raccoon.
Shh. We're not supposed to talk about that.
That's an episode for another date once we get the permissions.
All right. With all that being said, this is Stephen Hawk signing out, and I'll see you next week.
And this is Jimmy Coe telling you to keep your eyes to the skies and your feet on the ground, and we'll catch you next week. That's all for this week's episode of Cosmic Sponge. Please don't forget to rate and review us wherever you listen. It helps others find the show. If you have any questions or have a story you'd like to share, you can contact us using our email account, firstcontact@cosmicsponge.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next week.